Hello, I am Eric Miller. It's Sunday, 25 February 2024, and this is the final session of Chennai Storytelling Festival 2024. This session is a discussion about the ways the Dravidian movement has used stories to communicate its messages. I first came to India and to Tamil Nadu in 1988. That's 36 years ago. And I saw immediately that the DMK, the ADMK were part of a social cultural movement that went beyond politics. It had to do with identity. So I have learned a little bit about the Dravidian movement in these past 36 years. Of course, I'm a foreigner. I'm from New York City, but I've lived here in Chennai. Certainly, the last 20 years I've lived here. Konjam Tamil Teriyam. I don't have a good mind for learning languages in addition to English. Even as a boy in New York, learning Spanish and French, I was not so good. But Konjam. So I thought it would be a good idea to have a session in the festival, which I direct, on ways stories have been used in the Dravidian movement, because as I've learned, there's a body of ancient Tamil literature called the Sangam literature, linguistically dated to have been written between 1500 and 2500 years ago, which really portrays a society. Of course, there were kings, but there were also merchants. There were craftspeople of all sorts. There were cities. And there were tribal people living in the forest, just like today. So that ancient Tamil culture, a lot of it is presented in a humanistic way. Buddhism and Jainism were strong during parts of that time, and those are basically philosophies. They're not at root, they're not religions. And the story that really I had decided when I was in college 45 years ago that I wanted to study an ancient culture someplace. And I decided really upon India, but then the element that brought me to Tamil Nadu was a religion professor gave me an English translation of Silappadigaram, the Epic of the Ankle Bracelet. And I took it back to my dorm room and I read it, and I was knocked out. I was amazed that this human story, it's 99% a human story, that this human story with a society, with craftspeople, with towns and cities and all, that it existed, approximately the Silappadigaram that we have, the version written by Prince Elangovan is linguistically dated to have been written about 1,500 years ago. And, I had thought that all ancient Indian stories would be gods flying in the sky. I had no idea that there was this body of literature of which Silappadigaram is a shining example. So not only that, the story is about a woman who goes to the king and accuses the king of abusing justice, of having misapplied justice. That the king, she says, the king put her husband to death unjustly. And the king listens. And when she proves it with physical evidence, he apologizes and he dies. He falls down. He dies really of a broken heart that he had misapplied, that he had abused justice. So there is this ancient tradition in Tamil culture of the respect for the individual. At that point, she's a widow, far away from her family, no money, no social status, but the king listens to her, So this is a part of ancient Tamil culture, which still flavors Tamil culture today. You can say it's old hat, but I feel it. I feel that authorities in Tamil Nadu today keep in mind the mistake that the Pandyan king made. And they know that if they make a similar mistake, see, not only the king died, but the god of fire decided to burn the city to purify it. But good people and animals could escape. Kanagi suggested this to the god of fire, but the god of fire made the decision to purify the city by fire. So present day authorities know that this can happen. So this story was made into a movie numerous times as part of the Dravidian movement. In 1941, a movie titled Kanagi. 1964, a movie titled Pumpuhar. And it is a leading social justice story here in Tamil Nadu. So 3 people have kindly submitted, experts, much more expert than me, have submitted, 2 people have submitted essays, and 1 has submitted a video recording on this topic of how ways the Dravidian movement has used stories, including the epic of the ankle bracelet, Silapadigaram, to communicate its messages. So I will, and some of those people might be joining us now or may have joined us. But I will play some of the video recording, and I will show you some of the essays that have been written, and then I'm hoping we can have a little discussion. Let me just take a look at the list of people who are here. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, I want to begin by showing you. Oh my goodness, Mr. TKS Elangovan is joining us. I'm removing my spotlight, and Mr. TKS, I think, has come in as non-video, but let's see. No, I don't see. Hide non-video. Mr. TKS Elangovan, if you're here, please say hello. And yes, Sudha, you have written in the chat section. Sudha, you have written participants chat. Yes, let me get that. An offshoot of the DMK is the ADMK. Yes, it all began with a party called the Justice Party, which I believe was not a political party. Almost 100 years ago. Mr. TKS Elangovan, hello. Can you hear me? Please turn on your mic. You're muted.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
I can hear
thank you so much for coming. Mr. TKS Elangovan has been a member of parliament in both houses and is a longtime communication director and now public relations director for the DMK. So it's a great honor that you're here. And Mr. TKS has made a video recording on this topic of how ways the Dravidian Party, starting with the Justice Party, has used stories. So we're going back to the time of Periyar. Periyar, E.V. I won't even pronounce his EVR.
Ramasamy.
Yes.
E.V. Ramasamy Periyar.
Yes. And then Anadrai, and then Dr. Karunanidhi, the leaders, especially Anadrai and Karunanidhi, have been cinema writers of cinema, so they could really put into practice this method of using stories to promote the Dravidian movement. And I just want to say, as a preface, I see the Dravidian movement as a global model of social movement for the downtrodden, for the marginalized, for the disadvantaged. I say we are all Dravidian. I relate, and I feel we should all relate, because all of us are in favor of social justice. Carnegie's famous words in the Epic of the Anklet, when she confronts the king, "Yeniku nidi venam," I want justice. And that is a universal need and want of people all over the world. So I thank the Dravidian culture for giving us the Dravidian movement and its use of stories. So, Mr. TKS, I could show part of your video, but maybe would you say a few words about the history? See, I have a very limited knowledge. As I mentioned, I know Silapadigaram was made into a movie in 1941 called Carnegie, and in 64 named Pumpuhar. I'm very aware of Parashakti, which came in the 1950s. Could you, to begin, could you say a word or two about why Parashakti was such a brilliant moment in the history of the Dravidian movement?
Yes, I can say. Hitherto, until Parasakti came, was picturized and released, the movies were based on, most of the Tamil movies were based on mythological stories. Parasakti is a story of a social issues, which talked about women welfare and how a widow woman was ill-treated by the society, and how she was, her brother came and he understands that her sister is suffering. He came to India from Burma and he protected her. The problem was that women were ill-treated, women were not even considered important in the Indian society. So Parasakti was a movie which worked for the welfare of the and rightfulness of the women, and equal space among human beings along with men. That is the main theme of Parasakti. Most of the stories we can see, we used Tamil literature 2000 years back, Sangam literature, to show how the Tamils lived, but how the religion of the North projected human beings, and how the Manu Dharma concept was put into us, so that people are divided into various classes. Women were not treated on par with men. So this was the situation earlier, and most of the epics movies based on mythological stories also said the same, spoke about the same. But the Dravidian leaders thought that we can pick up stories from Tamil literature which gives equality to everybody. In fact, Thiruvalluvar had said 2000 years back that all men are born equal. So that was the theme of the Dravidian movement, that all men are born equal. And we picked the stories from our literature which speaks about equality among human beings. So we chose our movies based on these stories, our literature, literary stories. So that is the reason why our leaders could speak on this subject, because we had a culture earlier, 2000 years back, an equanimous culture. But subsequently, the North Indian culture, the Brahminic culture, the Manu Dharma concept had come to stay here in Tamil Nadu, in the south of India, and it spoiled what the original culture of the Tamils were. So we had to go back to our literature to pick stories and tell the people, and the movies were presented on those terms.
Mm-hmm. And not just mythological, but I think many Indian movies from the beginning of talkies in the 1930s and 40s, many of them portrayed very wealthy people, beautiful mansions, even today. uh,
Yes, yes.
lifestyles that are totally out of the reach of the great majority of people. But I understand the many of the movies that came out of the Dravidian movement showed the so-called common people,
Yes,
not the super wealthy, not the super powerful. Can you
yes.
tell us any titles of movies, any examples of movies that had a hero or heroine of from the people, not from the upper class?
No, see, common man. The problem was with the common man. The
Mm-hmm.
workers, particularly the workers,
Mm,
particularly the people who toiled in the land,
mm,
particularly the people who constructed buildings,
mm.
particularly the people who served the upper caste people. What are their sufferings? How they were treated, or I can say that how they were ill-treated in the society. They are workers.
So
They had built the country,
they were
but
moving
they were not
those
treated
people.
on par with the rich man, on par with the upper caste people. So we had to pick stories from that section of the people.
Mm,
That is why we chose them.
mm-hmm. And then for some historical movies, I understand that there was in some stories the king had an assistant or a military a general called a talapati.
Yes,
And I think in some of the movies coming out of the Dravidian movement, that talapati came from the common people. He was not an aristocrat. Can you tell us a little bit about this talapati character?
I'll tell you. See, in the north, there were 3, 4 kingdoms. North of Vindhyas. The Vindhya range of mountains divide the south and north. In the north of Vindhyas, there were many empires. The Marathas, the Guptas, the Mauryas. Like there were so many empires where the rulers should come only from the uh, Kshatriya class as classified by the Manu Dharma. Whereas in the south, we had 3 major kingdoms, the Cheras, the Cholas, the Pandyas. There, the rulers are from, should be only, can be able to control the country, run the country smoothly. They were not selected from a particular class by birth. The question of by birth does not arise in the south. Whereas in the north, the practice was if somebody was not a Kshatriya, he will not be made a king. Here, a man who can run the country and protect the people will be made a king, irrespective of his birth class. That is the difference. So the Talabadi will be a warrior. He can be from any caste. Whereas in the north, he should also be from that Kshatriya class. That is the difference.
Mm-hmm. So, do any other movie titles come to mind that feature a hero or heroine from the common people?
Yeah, there are many movies, particularly this Chennai Silapadikaram.
Mm-hmm.
Women in this Indian society were not even, they do not even come under these 4 classes.
Mm.
This Varnashrama concept of Manu Dharma, they were called Avarnas. That is, they don't belong to any class. They don't belong to the 4 classes. But here, Kannagi could go to the court and ask the king and question the king as to how he could do this mistake. The king accepts his mistake and lives his life. That
Yes.
telling that he has done a wrong. So that was the story of a common woman who can go to court and tell the king that he had committed a blunder, and the king accepts it. That is not possible in the North India. So we had to fight for the purpose of these movies is to fight for the rights of the Tamils, which we were enjoying 2000 years back during that is the culture of Tamil Nadu. When Tirukkural was written, there is no other languages, only Tamil was there in the south of India. Then subsequently, when with the entry of Sanskrit, this Telugu, Malayalam and Kannada came into practice. So the culture, our culture was equanimity.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to bring back that equanimity for which we had started this movement.
Mm-hmm. Now, there was a man named M.R. Radha.
Yes.
I believe he was a playwright as well as an
Yes.
actor.
Actor.
And someone has mentioned to me a production called Tears of Blood, in which
Yes.
a wandering man was the hero.
Yes.
Can you tell us anything about this Tears of Blood? Was it a
Yeah,
play?
yeah. He was not a he was a man educated in a foreign country. He comes back, gets married to a woman here, but because of his wrongdoings, with his relationship with many women, he becomes a leper.
Hmm.
Then nobody respects him.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, he understands his mistake and corrects himself. And what he does was, as a leper, he could not live with his wife. So what he does was, he gets his wife to be, he advises his wife to be married to his friend.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a leper, she could not live with him.
Mm-hmm.
That is the story of Ratta Kanni, Tears of Blood.
It's a very difficult subject. That is
Yes.
not escapism. You know,
It's not escapism.
no,
Yeah.
it's not escapism. It's really dealing with some harsh realities of life.
Yes.
Hmm. Miss Uma Vangal, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Great. Okay. And I'm adding you to this spotlight. You have very kindly sent an essay about how another leader of the Dravidian movement, how her writings, how her novels and short stories, especially promote empowerment of women. Yes, and
Yes.
I'm speaking of the former chief minister, Jayalalitha. It is a sort of a secret, and I don't know why she kept it a secret, but it's a secret that she wrote a number of novels and short stories, many of them centering around the theme of empowerment of women, directly following up on the ideology of Periyar. One of the founders of the Dravidian movement, and he also very much stressed empowerment of women. Can you tell us, we could look through your essay, but off the top of your head, could you tell us one or two of her novels or short stories that explore this theme?
Yeah, I first must apologize for the noise. I'm actually at the Chennai International Short Film Festival. And so you can, it's also interesting that it is a theater where we are talking about stories and all that.
No,
But
your sound is great. One thing that would be great if you could put your phone on a table or on a, if you could stabilize your phone so you wouldn't have to move it around. Is it possible to put it on a shelf or something?
no, I'm actually on the steps of the theater. But yeah, I think I'll hold on to this. Is this fine?
It's fine. It's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, so I was able to get my hands on one copy of Nenjile Oru Kanal, which is one of a very, very moving two-part novel that was brought out as a series and then, of course, made into a novel. Again, only one part was available on Amazon, and I managed to get only a few excerpts from Uravin Kaidigal. Both are written, interestingly, from a young girl's perspective. So in a way, she uses that as a kind of hook to challenge long-held beliefs that are very patriarchal and, misogynistic to some extent, but also imposing so many societal restrictions in the name of, culture, in the name of religion, in the name of family. And so in a way, directly echoes what Periyar was contesting constantly, right? So instead of directly referring to them, what she does is make sure she brings in all the issues that he highlighted including things like child marriage, where this child is just 10 years old and she's married off to a much older man who's already married. But then she's constantly also advised by many people around her, saying kallanalum kanavan kullanalum purushan, those kinds of traditionally held beliefs that restrain a woman from truly being herself, one, and two, becoming so dominated by the demands made of her. And so, she has this amazing way of describing, but not describing in detail. So, for instance, she talks about marital rape, and she talks about this husband who's drunk and comes in and rapes her when she's 13 years old. And she says the door on her innocence and childhood was permanently shut that day. Instead of, describing the rape itself, she just makes it, very succinctly, one line, and the picture is so stark, it hits you. And then she talks about, the impossibility of a woman wanting to remarry. And when she walks out on her husband, how her family responds and says, you must have done something for your husband to ill-treat you this way. And here she's talking about domestic violence, she's talking about enablers, she's talking about how the woman has to just put up with abuse. She cannot escape a situation like that.
And how does the story end?
It's interesting because she actually, when she stops the series in one magazine and moves to another magazine, she leaves a little phrase there which says, I leave it to the audience to decide how we should go forward. And then there's a whole lot of negative response from the audience saying that, oh, how can you do this? And then she comes up with a solution. At the end of it, this man commits suicide because he's unable to bear the weight of all that he's done to her. And he takes the coward's way out and just says, I'm sorry, I know I'm being a coward, but I need to leave. I cannot face all of this anymore. And he leaves. And then, of course, the second part is her rise. So one ends at that point, and then the second part is her empowerment as a woman, who then says, now it's upon me. I got to take care of my family, my children, myself. And then she ends up becoming a superstar. And I think it's because she was always in the film world. She's also quite, fairly influenced by that world. And so a lot of these men are modeled on the men she encounters in her journey in the film industry. And interestingly, they all embody all that is wrong with Indian society at that point in time that Periyar points out. About predators, about, manipulators, about men who take advantage of young women, society that tells you that you stay in a marriage no matter what. A woman cannot leave her husband. You cannot get married when your husband dies. As a widow, you cannot have a widow remarriage. So all of those things that he points out and then talks about self-respect, she brings about that whole concept in both the novels. The second one is even more almost like a Balachandar film script, where she has this young girl, a college girl, who falls in love with a man who is a superstar. And she models that on Lata and Rajnikant and their meeting, It's very interesting. She's obviously inspired by all that she sees around her and reads around her. And then she brings in the whole notion of, she brings in the Electra complex. And she makes it an incestuous relationship because when she takes him to introduce her to her mother, he turns out to be her mother's ex-husband. And again, there was a whole lot of negative criticism and feedback from readers saying, how can you have this kind of a situation? How can you show a young girl sleeping with her father? And she says, but that's the whole point. She didn't know he was her father. And I think in a way that reflects the kind of criticism that was thrown at Periyar himself. And that's what she was referring to in that story. It's a very interesting journey.
Of the process in those days of publishing chapters of a novel in a monthly magazine as a serial. Charles Dickens did that also. Many writers did that in those days. But the thing that by that method, the public expresses their feelings and opinions, and sometimes that affects the outcome of the story, because the writer may want to confront, but may be afraid to confront some of the beliefs and hopes of the writer.
And I think that's why she introduces a foreword in each of these books that she's written. There's a foreword in which she says, the law is a binding thing in our society, but then human beings do not have law. They have emotions, and you need to negotiate these emotions. That's what she says in the foreword of her story. So in a way, she's preparing the audience and saying, I'm not going to be showing you what is legally and socially acceptable. My book is going to be about unconventional characters. It's going to be about men and women who are pulled by their emotions and not by law or legal binding.
See, so the leaders of the Dravidian movement on both the DMK side and the ADM side, for those of you who are not in Tamil Nadu, those were two opposing Dravidian parties, but both of them were led by writers. Okay, Miss Uma, if you can stay with us for a couple more minutes, that would be great. But I want to go back to Mr. TKS for a moment and ask you about N.S. Krishnan. That is a name that comes up again and again, and I've seen clips of him in movies where he's very spontaneous, just like Sivaji Ganesan. Both of them are very spontaneous and often very funny. One movie that has been mentioned to me is Nella Tumbi, in which Gandhiism and rationalism both played a part. Can you tell us anything about Nella Tumbi?
Nalla Thambi was a story written by our founder leader C.N. Annadurai. It was his story, and there they were searching for the person who has to take up a big wealth. The Jamindar had died, and his property should go to a person who is their legal heir, and they find N.S. Krishnan and bring him there, thinking that he was Nalla Thambi. He was the legal heir. But what happened was, he is not interested in staying in that palace. He wants to go to the people and speak about how we should live and what is right and what is wrong. So he acts in a movie, in a drama, and he says that drinking is about drinking and other many hazardous things which the people follow. So he speaks against that. And Bhanumati was the heroine of that movie. She did not like Nalla Thambi because Nalla Thambi is not a character who is like a legal. He does not have any zamindari attributes. He wants to live as a common man and go to the people. Bhanumati does not like that. That was the story was based on those lines, and it was the movie gave many messages to the people as to how to live. And there was one story he sings. It's about an untouchable, because there was a story in India, in Tamil Nadu, about Nandan. Nandan is a scheduled caste man, but he was not allowed to enter the temple, Chidambaram temple. So that, based on that, he writes about a story about Kindan. He just used the name Kindan and says that this Kindan goes to Chennai, have education, and come up with life. So when these untouchables were given education, they will also come up in life. Is the message Anna wanted to tell the people, and for which the Nalla Thambi story was used. And N.S. Krishnan played the major role, the main character in that movie. And N.S. Krishnan was a very strong rationalist. He spoke about continuously in every movie he had acted. He talks about rationalism, he talks about equality, he talks about men are all born equal. That is the message he gives by way of his songs, by way of his acting. And without him at one stage, if there is no N.S. Krishnan, the movie will not run. That was the situation. Without N.S. Krishnan, the movies will not go to the theatre. So N.S. Krishnan was a must in any movie to run for quite some time.
You know, my sense that, oh, go ahead.
But he used, and he had found one poet who can write these rationalist songs called Udumalai Narayana Kavi. So he wrote songs for him to sing in the movies. So his songs were all rationalist songs, and he does not talk about atheism. That is a different subject. But equality among human beings is a major subject which N.S. Krishnan chose to take to the people.
You know, my sense is that the Dravidian movement's promotion of rationalism was primarily a reaction against a religious mythology that tended to promote the caste system.
Yes.
So many members of the Dravidian movement are religious in some way or another.
Yes.
But they protest against a particular aspect of religion that supports the caste system.
Yes. And they used all media, whatever media available to them to promote this. What happened was in Maratha Empire, King Shivaji was not made the king, the Brahmins opposed Shivaji becoming a king because Shivaji was not from the Kshatriya class. Annadurai wrote a story, Chandramohan or Shivaji Kanda Hindu Rajyam. In that story, he speaks at length about this and how the Brahmin with a huge expenditure could make Shivaji as a Kshatriya and made him a king. That is history. So he used that history, and that was played by our actor Shivaji Ganesan. He was earlier V.C. Ganesan, but because he played the role of Shivaji in most of his dramas, he was called as Shivaji Ganesan.
So he took the name from the historical character.
Yes.
Wonderful. Miss Uma, can you give us another example of writing by former Chief Minister J. Lalitha, which also supports women's empowerment?
Yeah, I think she talks about what she says is that women should be educated, and she is a voracious reader, and her education is stopped midway in the story. So she says this has to be changed. We have to educate our children, and she insists that her 2 children should go to school, especially the daughter. And then she talks about Nenjile Oru Kanal, and even in the other one, Uravin Kaidigal, she says the girl, because she went to school and college, she's an independent thinker, and she's able to rationalize and make a decision that works best for all concerned. And then there's also this whole, when Mr. Elangovan TKS was talking about property and how women are not given part of the property. There is an entire segment in Nenjile Oru Kanal where the father-in-law would like to bestow all the property on her and the son, so that because his son is a wayward man. But then the lawyer disputes and says, no, but how can you do that? She's a woman. And, how can you just give the property to her? And so she disputes. So there's a nice argument by the father-in-law saying that she's a smart woman. She's well-read. Even though she didn't go to school, she's taught herself so much. She will be able to run this business and this family better than my son. The need of the hour is for us to trust our women to know what to do. And then she talks about when she walks out on her husband, she talks to her parents and she says, I cannot allow this man to break my spirit, and I cannot allow my self-respect to be trampled upon. And I think somewhere that kind of ties in with, this whole notion of patriarchy and how it decides women are not fit to run, businesses or their own finances,
Yes.
and that men will be the ones to get it, that kind of thing. So I think somewhere it's all very, very similar and echoes a whole lot of the self-respect movement and its goals and ideals.
Wonderful. Okay, Mr. Namachivayam, are you here? I know you by your short name, Mr. Shiva. If you're here, please say hello and turn on your camera if you can.
He is there, Eric.
He is, but okay, let's see if he can come more on. I want to ask about the movie Manohara, which I think the dialogue was written by Dr. Karunanidhi, is adapted from one of the Tamil epics, Kundala Kesi. Was that movie an important part of this movement, Manohara?
Eric, I have to tell you that there's a message from Shiva.
Yeah.
He says, "Greetings, team.
Hmm.
Apologies for the inconvenience. I'm listening to this from the bus." So
Well, Shiva,
probably
turn on your camera and mic just for a minute to say hello to us. I know there'll be a bus sound, but
1 minute.
if you can do it.
Yeah.
All right, well, anyway,
Yeah.
that's fine. So do either of you do you have any thoughts about this movie Manohara, based on one of the epics? Is that an important movie in this story, Mr. TKS?
Yes, yes. It was a story about a prince. Manohara was a common man. He was in love with the princess. But the Talapati, as you said, the captain of the army in that country, he misused the king and he wanted to marry that girl. So there was a fight and Shivaji Ganesan was the hero. He was put into prison. So it was like a story like that, that the people who are in power taking the rights of their own and pushing people out. That was the kind of a story against which that was the Manohara was about that thing.
Shiva has written about, well, to read from his essay, Kalignor Karunanidhi modified the fundamental stories that were given to him and used the Dravidian pattern to modify the scripts. Can either of you tell us about the Dravidian pattern, or Shiva, if you can write in the chat box, can you elaborate on the Dravidian pattern that that Dr. Karunanidhi applied to stories? I think he may be referring to the Talapati figure, who in these stories comes from the common people, not from the
No, what I know that he had modified a character in his movie Pumbugar, that the goldsmith had robbed the ornament from Kannagi.
Yes.
The king's wife, the prince, the queen. But what happened was, when Kannagi went with her ornament, the king thought that she had taken away the queen's so. Yeah. So it was the mistake of the goldsmith, as per Shilapadigaram. But he did not want to quote one caste, that this caste is a thief. So he blocked that and he changed a little. That one I can I know, because he does not want to tell the people that goldsmiths are robbers like that.
And there's a legend that eventually one member of the goldsmith community sang to the goddess so beautifully and so emotionally that that goddess forgave him and forgave the goldsmith community for what happened. That is a religious legend. You know, of course, there are many little legends that are added to the main story. Miss Uma, would you add something?
Yeah, I wanted to add that one of the patterns with the Dravidian communication strategy was to build in all the traits of the folk hero, the Tamil folk hero, into a subaltern character who would then become almost like a messiah, but from among themselves. They didn't need someone from an upper class or a forward community, as we call them, to lift them up. They wanted someone to be, they wanted the hero to be from among the folk. So one of the strategies they used when they created the hero was to create something that we, after a lot of research and analysis, came up with a theory called the octa motifs. And these 8 traits had to be there in the folk hero for them to become the hero of the Dravidian stories. So they had to come from the subaltern masses. They had to come from communities that are usually not seen as leaders. And, you know, they had to have certain values. They respected women. They upheld Tamil language. They upheld the 3 words that Annadurai spoke about, Kadamai, Ganniyam, Kattupadu. So all of these become necessary traits of the folk hero, the Tamil folk hero, who will then become the man who will speak from the oppressed for the oppressed. So, you know, that's one of the reasons why the audience could identify, even though they didn't specify castes and communities, they could identify one among them fighting. So MGR's entire persona was created using those octa motifs.
Wonderful. What are those 3 words from Annadurai? Can you give us the English?
Duty, dignity,
Kadamai,
and discipline.
Ganniyam, Kattupadu. Yeah, there you go. He gave you the English. Duty, dignity, and discipline.
Discipline.
Super. All right. Well, the people who are listening, do you have any questions or comments? We have almost 20 people here, but of course most of them don't have their cameras on. Yes, Sudha, please tell us.
Yes, I have a question for Uma. Uma, you said, you rightly pointed out that they promoted somebody from the subaltern, somebody from amongst themselves to be a leader. And I think MGR, his whole persona was fitted that image very easily. And so were his songs. They were all aspirational, I think. It was about the poor aspiring for a better life and, you know, making it on their own steam and hard work and the rest of it. All this happened when there was opposition to Brahmin hegemony and some amount of patriarchy. So did the film persona help MGR and Jayalalitha to cut through this this whole maze? Was it any easier because of the stories, the songs, and whatever else?
I would say that the songs were basically written very, very carefully to reflect the Dravidian principles and ideology. But often when we did a study of electoral patterns, we found that the years that MGR's films were super successful, he lost the elections. And the years that the films didn't do too well, He won the elections. So I think
Sympathy.
that's a kind of long-held belief that he won elections only because of his films. I do believe that both MGR and Jayalalitha after him, and then much before that, Annadurai and Kalaignar with the dialogues in Parashakti also reflected this notion that it was not just about the Brahmin hegemony that they were talking about. I think they were contesting the oppression by multiple upper castes. So in Parashakti, for instance, it was not just the Brahmin priest. It was also the trader. It was also the, I think Mr. TK will be in agreement on this, that it was not just about the Brahmin bashing. It was also about the systematic and systemic oppression of certain castes and communities by some castes who had privileges, who had property, who had power. So a lot of it was about how do we correct this imbalance? And the only way we can do it is by getting educated, by gaining self-respect, and by lifting ourselves out of our positions and get to a position of power so that we can then enact social reform. And that's where I think Periyar and Anna also fall out, because Anna decides the only way to ensure that our social reform goals are met is to be in power and actually legislate. And I think a lot of the legislations that come the minute the Dravidian parties come in
Yes,
6-7.
there was a critique of capitalism as an aspect of the Dravidian movement.
All been individual reform.
Your voice is breaking up a little bit, but you've had a great signal with your mobile phone and traveling. We appreciate. Yes, it seems the Dravidian movement includes some criticism or some questioning of capitalism itself. And I know that NSK visited the Soviet Union. See, in those days, the Soviet Union, especially in the early days, presented a very inspiring, hopeful vision for humanity, of the people taking care of each other. And I know there was communication. Well, India in general was in the socialist camp. But NSK, I think he went and did a secular Vilupatu storytelling in Moscow. Must have been with the Russian translation. And our present chief minister was named after a leader of the Soviet Union. So there has been a relationship between the Soviet Union.
Can I intervene?
Yes.
And jocularly, I can quote one thing.
Huh.
When Periyar went to, E.V. Ramasamy went to Russia, USSR. After coming back, see, the leader, the people who were given birth to a new child will ask the leaders to name them. So what Periyar did was, he named the children as Moscow and Russia. What happened was, somebody asked, what is that you are naming the children with the country's name and the city's name? He said, why you are naming your child as Parani and Chidambaram? Why can't I do that? To name them with the city, Moscow and Russia. That was the impact of the social USSR on the people of the Dravidian leaders. So they chose to name the children with the name of Moscow and Russia and all. And that was the policy adopted. In fact, when Periyar started his self-respect movement, there was another movement along with it where most of the very senior communist leaders were together, and they started a party, a party with communist ideology. So they were together. Singara Velar was part of that party. Only when Periyar opposed Indian independence because of his own reasons, the Communist Party went out of the nationalist movement. Until then, they were together. So the Dravidian movement ideology was more or less communist ideology.
Very good. Okay,
In
Mr.
fact, I think Annadurai was directly influenced by the the Soviet theory of using all media for propaganda. So I think that's one of the things that many people don't realize.
Soviet communism was inspirational all over the world in those early days, 20s, 30s, 40s. Both of my parents, who were journalists, both of them passed away 20 years ago. Both of them worked on communist newspapers in New York City in the 1930s and 40s. So there was a global joy and hope with Soviet communism in those days. Mr. Namachivayam has written in the chat section, reinforcing all that we've spoken of, reflecting the lives of common people, unlike how a king looks at people. The Dravidian pattern helps us to understand the perspective of common people towards the government and the leaders of society. Before the Dravidian era, all movies were about mythologies and artificial imagined wealthy lifestyles. But with the Dravidian pattern, people easily started envisioning their life reflected in the cinema. And that's the place where the real revolution happened. The common masses felt that they can revolt against the fascist forces in the right way, with the right ideological progression. So let's come to the present day. Is the Dravidian movement still strong?
Yes, the movement is still strong.
Wonderful.
We are for equanimity.
Mm-hmm.
We are for women empowerment.
Mm-hmm.
What we have done is, even in the recent budget, we have ensured that women are given education, and the government is spending money on women for their education, for their higher education. Even in the recent budget, they have allotted money for the women students to have girl students to have their education, because for want of money, they should not stop, because education can be stopped by the parents when they don't have money.
Mm.
So the government is supporting women students, girl students to study, so they are giving money to them. That is one of the programs in our recent budget also.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Uma, would you want to add anything?
I think what's happened though is over the decades, some of it has been diluted, and it has become so focused on populism that I'm not so sure that we're really looking at more women participating in public life, more women coming into politics or policy making. We are not seeing equity in the true sense. I believe so, as a woman who lives in Tamil Nadu. I think many of us shy away from getting into politics and policy because it is not a very conducive space. We see a lot of struggle for women who try to get into that space. So on the one hand, yes, I think education-wise, we've achieved a lot more. Human Development Index-wise, we've achieved a lot more. I must say the self-help group movement has created a distinct difference in family finances and what say women have in that, in the rural areas particularly. But I think a lot of the social inequalities still persist. So I think there's a lot more work to do.
Wonderful. All right, anybody, any, this session is scheduled to go for another half an hour, but we can end a little early if we feel like it. Does anyone have any additional thoughts? Oh, June in Toronto. Oh, you're clapping, but you're not raising your hand.
No. Live here.
Okay, go ahead.
At the beginning of this, I had to look up this movement because I knew nothing about it at all. But I've been educated today and I found it very fascinating. And I hope the movement goes forward with more support for women. And Uma, your comments were especially heartfelt for me. Thank you.
Anybody else? I just find it very touching that the leaders of the movement and the leaders of the government in Tamil Nadu have been writers, have been creative people who helped shape not just the actual government, but also the culture through their writings of cinema. Sudha?
Eric, I want to know why from Mr. Elangovan, why language has become such an issue. Of course, we need to take pride in Tamil literature and, our epics and all of that. But today, we are living in a global world. So we need to have an all-embracing view of things, appreciation of many languages. Like in the storytelling world, we welcome stories from all streams. We learn from each of them. So why can't we have a more broader perspective, embrace many languages, learn from everything, and become enriched in the process? I think instead of dividing ourselves and ending up in a fractured society, that is my sincere question to you.
Before you answer, Mr. TKS, I want to answer that Tamil should be one of the many languages on the global stage. It should not be lost. Okay, Mr. TKS.
No, we are not against any language. We are only against imposition of a particular language on us. Our fight is against imposition of the particular language. But people choose many languages. We have in Chennai, we have a Hindi Prachar Sabha, South Indian Hindi Prachar Sabha, where students go and study. Stopping. If the students want to learn Hindi, we are not stopping them. But when Hindi is imposed and the communication, if it says that government to government communication should also be in Hindi, we oppose that. The education should compulsorily have any Hindi, we oppose it. We are not language. Many people are learning many languages. There are students learning French. There are students, most of the students go to English medium schools. We are not against any language. The only thing is that no imposition should be of any language should be made on us. That is our only thing. We are not per se against languages.
Also, sir, today the state is a melting pot. You have people from other states coming in. Our people are going, migrating elsewhere in search of jobs. I mean, there's a lot of intermarriages, north, south, east, west, Indian, foreign. So I think if we can, allow everything to flourish.
No, everything is going on. We are not stopping anything. Only we are against the union government's move to impose Hindi on us. That's all. If somebody wants to learn Hindi, we are not stopping them.
The term melting pot, I believe especially comes from my old hometown, New York City, which was called a melting pot. But then at some point, people said, no, we don't want a melting pot where everything becomes the same and everything gets assimilated into a mainstream. We want a gorgeous mosaic where the individual pieces keep their identity, but fit together to make a beautiful pattern together. So I think that's a good idea. And I know your first prime minister also believed in the different parts of society keeping their individual genius, as he called it, and contributing their genius to the combination without getting lost. Okay, Mr. Shiva has added in the chat. Let's see. Nowadays, also movies talk about corporate exploitation. Well, that's part of the critique of unregulated capitalism. But he writes, Mom Manan is a movie that talked about how a political leader from a socially oppressed background was not given enough space to prove himself. And with the right effort, he made his way into mainstream politics. Mr. TKS, do you know this movie, Mamanan?
Yes, yes, I know the movie. Nowadays, there are many movies coming up on those lines where they are against caste differences and other things. We watch movies, but this is because of, I can say, everybody were empowered, everybody had education, everybody is in good jobs. The problem is that the society is not allowing them. They want, now that the question is not between earlier it was the Manu Dharma concept, it was against Manu Dharma concept. Now, all those people who were empowered, who were given education, they are fighting amongst themselves as to which caste is a superior caste. That is the local issue which has to be, what I can say, a solution has to come. And the movies, present day movies are coming out with various solutions and are against that. It has to continue because this is the major problem. Now it is not a problem between Brahmins and non-Brahmins. It is a problem among the non-Brahmins. Here, upper caste, scheduled caste, or backward classes, there is a fight among these people, which has to stop. And these movies are taking the right line in preaching this.
Wonderful.
Sir, is it because of vote bank politics? Because, you know, parties are aligned with certain caste groups. Is it?
No, 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 no. It is in every rural area, in every village, in every small town. We can see they are not politicians, but they don't want the scheduled caste people to come to the backward class. Even in marriages, a backward class boy getting married to a scheduled caste woman. We even today I saw that a boy who had married a scheduled caste boy marrying a upper caste, backward class girl was killed. So that is now into the minds of the people who are living in the rural areas. We are seeing many fights now. That has nothing to do with politics.
So then if there's honor killing and all that, how is the Dravidian movement trying to fight these social evils?
Yeah, we are doing it. We are doing it. We speak. We everywhere we speak about it. We say that it is wrong. We say that even the weddings which we conduct, or we don't talk about caste. We have many weddings conducted between two different castes. In my house, I have two daughters and myself, all the three were married to a person belonging to another caste. So that class, the society had not yet, this has to change in those lines because everybody is educated, everybody goes to a good job. In an office, you can go and see many people. But when the question of marriage comes, still they are reluctant to accept people from the lower caste. That has to change. That we can. That is not political. That is the social society around them. They are afraid of the society around them. They think that if I get married to a lower caste girl, my people will not accept me. So something like that.
Yes.
That has to change. That has to be preached. Then the movies are doing good on those lines.
Jeff, I know you are very knowledgeable about ancient Celtic culture in Ireland. Was there a special relationship between kings and poets, or were kings also poets in ancient Celtic culture?
Kings weren't necessarily poets, but they could be. But we are the bardic class. In traditional Celtic culture, you have what's called the Aes Sedana, which were considered the intellectual classes, which were bards, brians, which were our lawyers. Strangely enough, blacksmiths. So you had a class of people that did that, but kings were very much, as a bard, my social status was equal to a king's. We are bards, the people that recorded our history, that kept our traditions, that fought for injustice. The whole bardic class was considered sacred. In fact, actually, in old times, if you raised a hand to me as a bard, you were considered to be cursed for 9 generations. We took that class of people very, very seriously, but we didn't have a caste system like India had.
Mhm.
Now, my son would be considered a bard, but he wouldn't necessarily have to become a bard. He could become something else. You didn't have to necessarily follow the line, and a lot of it was based on talent.
And I'm sure kings had their favorite bards who were also their advisors.
You have court bards, but then we also have a tradition of you'd have village storytellers, you'd have bards, you'd have traveling bards, and every king would have a bardic advisor.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so I'm sure you can understand how I'm so fascinated that here in South India, in the Dravidian movement, the role of bard and king were combined in a number of the leaders of the Dravidian movement, three of which became the leaders of the state. Okay.
Now, in our case, we as the bardic class was oppressed and attempted to be destroyed both by the Romans and the English, because they recognized the importance of the bards are the ones that kept the culture alive.
Uh-huh.
So we were considered now in Ireland, you maintained the titles of bard and live, and bards were regularly hung by the English. Now in Scotland, we stopped using the term bard and used the term Shanachie, which a Shanachie was just a storyteller. That's your village storyteller. We weren't a threat, but if we were considered to be bardic, then we became a threat.
Wonderful. Well, the leaders of the Dravidian movement were perceived to be a threat sometimes by the powers that be because of their, not just their political activity, but because of their artistic activity, which you know, was related to their political activity. But you know, actually 40 odd years ago when I was in college, I had decided I wanted to study in an ancient culture. And my choice really came down between India and Ireland. I saw both as so rich, but I chose India just because it was further away and less developed. And then I chose Tamil Nadu because of this story of the of this lady who protested against the king, and that the king listened to her. Okay, time for final thoughts. Ms. Uma, Mr. TKS, everyone else. Any last thoughts for today's session?
Well, I think I would really like to get my hands on the physical copies of some of these books, because reading them on Kindle is not the same. And also, interestingly, Jayalalitha has written several short stories too, and I'm not able to access most of them. But I do have the parables that she had shared in most of her speeches that someone has shared.
Ah.
She has used several parables in every political speech that she has made. And each of those parables illustrates something, you know, like a moral or kind of thing at the end of the story. So I think now I've got so hooked on to all of this that I'm actually going and reading more and more. So it's a wonderful start.
Sure, if you visit ADMK headquarters, you'll find someone there who can help you with these publications.
Hopefully, I'm not sure.
Wonderful. All right, Mr. TKS.
Why are they not using theater as much as they were in the past?
Theater?
The Dravidian movement.
Nobody's using theater much anymore.
Yeah, I think because in those days NSK they all travel. TKS Bhagavati, all the companies, the drama companies traveled a lot all around Tamil Nadu, and they staged plays, and which is why famously Rajaji called them Kutadis and things like that. But I think today theatre is no longer. When we're talking about theatre, I'm guessing you're talking about proscenium Tamil theatre. But today, the street theatre, which is largely driven by the communist ideology, does make inroads even today into small villages and towns.
No, the problem is that we are in power. We are in the place where we have to do. Now talking about or fighting against whom is the question. We are in power, we are in the position to do something, we are in the position to change the society. Earlier we were not in power, we had to fight against the society. Now we are there in power and we have to do. Like what when our leader Karnanidhi did was, he brought in an act where the women will have a share in the family property, like the sons. Girl children also will have share. So we are in the place where we have to perform, we have to do. That is what we are doing now. And the fight is going, has now reduced to the local areas where we have to go and preach them and change them. So what is the use of now talking about going to movie line and once again propagating? We have to do that. We are in a place where we have to perform.
But I think the fact that, as you yourself told us, some of the society seems to have regressed, and they're not really moving along with intercaste and interreligious kind of marriages. So maybe, as Sudha is mentioning, it's time to go back to the people. I don't know. I mean, it's just a thought that education, yes. And definitely, as you already pointed out, property rights, women empowerment, all of that has been happening. And definitely, there's been some amount of affirmative action where we've got all castes and communities to have some opportunities in Tamil Nadu. But if society is somewhere moving into a regressive space, where now, because of polarization, caste identities have become so much a part of our discourse and behavior and lifestyle choices, maybe it's time to reach out to the people again. I don't know. It's just a
Yes.
thought that, yes,
No, you are right.
we are in power, yes, all of that, but
Yes.
somewhere there is some gap, and I think we need to think of ways to address that.
Yes,
And while
definitely.
the laws are pretty much there, sir, the implementation is the problem. We
You're
have
right.
enough laws.
Yes,
but,
there
you
are
know,
laws.
But to get a case, moving and complete, it's a nightmare for anybody seeking justice. So
You're right. You're right. You're right. Because it has come down to the society in the lower level, and the people. It all depends on how the people living in their surrounding. What I fear that. So if my daughter or son gets married to a lower caste man, that people will laugh at me. My neighbors will laugh at me. That kind of a feeling is there now. That we have to change that. That
Yeah,
change. Okay. That
I
can
think
be through movie.
interestingly, like I was telling you, Jayalalitha's foreword was, சட்டங்கள் இருக்கு ஆனா மனிதர்கள் சட்டத்துக்கு படுவது ரொம்ப கஷ்டம். ஏன்னா அவங்களுக்கு இமோஷன்ஸ் தான் முக்கியம் அப்படிங்கிற மாதிரி அவங்க எழுதி இருக்கிறது ரொம்பவே கரெக்ட்னு நினைக்கிறேன்.
That kind of a thing.
Okay, the mention of theater has reminded me that the early people, NSK and all, they not only did theater all around the state, but they used folk forms like Vilupatu, a form of storytelling, and other folk forms to give the messages of the movement, and that's still going on today. Shiva has written in the 1970s, Tamil cinema started questioning patriarchy. The late director K. Balachandar was at the forefront of telling stories from a woman's perspective, and in the process questioned conservative Tamil gender values and norms. These films included Arangetram, The Wedding, 1973, about a Brahmin girl turning to prostitution to support her family. The violence enacted on her reflected the violence of patriarchy towards women. The empowerment of women through feminist narrative films is given further impetus by the 2017 film Aram, Good Deed. This film focused on the honest district collector who seeks to save a young girl who fell into a well. She battles against the bureaucracy and the media while organizing the police, and they have a successful rescue mission. Miss Uma, you have written, our dialogue writers and lyricists and theater singers were the bards of the Dravidian movement.
Yeah.
Shiva has written, Mr. Shiva has written, now the paradigm of theater culture is shifting again towards a niche comical pattern by the socially dominant people. Do I have that correct? Still, Dravidian activists and artists are performing plays, but all have chosen the electronic media for better efficiency. MEDAI, the Stage Cultural Association, is encouraging Ambedkar followers and Periyar followers to come up with more innovative theater concepts. But the mainstream media, with the help of social platforms, are focusing more on cinema idol worship. And that's why theater is not in the limelight these days. Yes, so this idol worship, celebrity worship is not helpful, but it's a very popular and powerful factor. Okay, this is a book. This is a big book, but we're just scratching the surface. And I'm so grateful, Mr. TKS, that you've been with us, and Miss Uma, that you've been with us, and Mr. Namachivayam, that you've been with us through the chat section. Would anyone like to say anything before we stop the recording?
You have the last word, Eric.
Well, I've had it. Well, I want to thank the people I've thanked, and I want to thank India and Tamil Nadu for having me stay here and live here. It's just a tremendous honor to be living in Tamil Nadu and India. I'm really very, very grateful.
And thank you for what you've done to storytelling in Tamil Nadu.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting us to be a part of this festival.
Thank you, Mr. Eric, for inviting us to take
Thank
part
you.
in this.
I
debate.
wanted to make it clear, stories and storytelling is not just for children. It's a lot of what makes the world go round in politics and advertising and ideology and identity.
Yeah.
It's all about story. Oh, Shiva. I think Shiva is joining us not in the flesh, but in the image.
Mr. TKS, on a personal note, your daughter and son-in-law are my students from Loyola Visual Communication.
Oh. Yes, yes. They were students of Loyola College. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
He's an actor now. He's acting in.
Yeah,
many
Madhvi and John were both my students, so
Uh,
very nice.
Mr. Namachivayam, I saw your image for just a moment. It looks like you're on a train or a plane or something. If you cannot turn on your camera, would you say a word or to us with your voice? There you
Actually, it's crowded here, but I'm glad that I've made my contribution about my learnings about this Dravidian movement. And to be clear, nowadays people are focusing more about idol worship. Even an actor named Vijay just started a political movement, Tamizhaga Vetri Kazhagam. But the followers don't have a clear understanding about how the dimensions of politics were sculpted by the current leaders. And Mr. TK sir was like a mentor to me. I worked in IPAC and we had some little bit communication before. And yes, I think this is a big opportunity for me also. Thank you for everything.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, I think with that, may we stop the recording? Yes, we can stop the recording.
yes.
Thank you, everybody.